we have to focus on what the people's priorities are. And if we do that, and if we're united, I think there still is all to play for, because I do believe that the Labour Party is complacent. In my own area of Harlow, the leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, came twice, even on eve of poll to Harlow. You had shadow cabinet members come up every few days. The Labour Party locally looked like they were measuring the curtains of the town hall. The cat got the cream, and they're looking like that nationally. They look complacent, and the public don't like that. So if we are united and focus on the cost of living and some of the issues I've mentioned, I think, as I say, there is all to play for.
Now, Andy Street's unexpected defeat by Labour in the West Midlands mayoral election has deepened the gloom within the Conservative Party. Whilst there's no sign of an attempt to challenge Rishi Sunak's leadership, the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, is calling for a change of course and a new plan. And one of her close allies, Sir John Hayes, Conservative MP for South Holland and the Deepings, told Times Radio he'd like to see changes in the cabinet too. Well, Robert Halfon is Conservative MP for Harlow, recently stood down as Minister for Skills, Apprenticeships and Higher Education. And he joins me now. Good afternoon to you, Robert.
Good afternoon.
Good to have you with us. Let me ask you, first of all, for your reaction to the picture that we've seen overall. The Tories did hold on in your backyard in Harlow, but so many losses across the country, including, of course, Andy Street.
Well, of course, it's really sad to see, hundreds of councillors, hardworking Conservative councillors, lose their seats, police commissioners, and, of course, the brilliant Mayor Andy Street. But if you look at where we've done well, and that includes Andy Street, because he lost by a whisker, but also the Mayor of Teesside, Ben Hoochin, and what we have done in Harlow, where we've done well is where we focused on the priorities of local people. And that includes affordable housing, it includes a focus on skills, building infrastructure, freezing the council tax, helping people with the cost of living and delivering for local residents. That is what the public wants. And that is the kind of conservatism that those Street and Hoochin represent as well.
We've heard from Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary, saying that it's time for the government to change course, that Rishi Sunak has to own and fix the problem. Do you think you do need quite a radical change of direction of the sort that she's outlining?
Well, the first thing I'd say is we need to unite as a party and actually back the Prime Minister, because some of the things I've just described to you, I believe, is what the Prime Minister is trying to do. There have been huge aftershocks since COVID, the war in Ukraine, of course, the different Prime Ministers in the Conservative Party, our own internal problems, the party divisions. And none of that has helped. And most governments post-COVID, who were in government during COVID, are unpopular. It's inevitable that there has been a fallout. But if the party is divided and we don't unite behind the Prime Minister, then we'll continue to face a serious problem. I do believe that there is a chance that we have to win the general election, but the party has to come together. We have to back the Prime Minister, but also have a relentless focus on what I call white van conservatism, which is issues like affordable housing, like helping people with the cost of living, particularly lower earners, and carrying on with our programme on skills and apprenticeships, both things which the two mayors, previous Mayor Andy Street and Ben Hoochin, focused on enormously in their campaigns.
What about what Suella Braverman and indeed Sir John Hayes have been talking about, though, which is some much more radical tax cuts, even tougher measures on immigration? She clearly wants the party to take a step to the right and is saying that that is the way to save the Conservative Party from a shattering defeat at the general election.
I'd say two things. First of all, the Prime Minister is a very difficult road to go down, because we still, I think, have something like 2 trillion in debt, again, because of the fallout of COVID. We've got to help people with the cost of living, and you also have to spend money on public services. So where they've been able to do tax cuts, that's exactly what they've done by cutting national insurance. So people will be better off by about £900 over the year. But you can't spend money that you don't have, because we also have to deal with the debt, because that is huge. It causes interest rates to stay high. We also need to get inflation down, because if you speak to a person in my local constituency, they'll be saying, I'm working 48 hours a week and I've got not a lot to show for it. So if we get inflation down and interest rates down, people will be much better off, and then we'll be able to cut taxes in the long term. In my own
But
local area,
that
we've
this
been
is
able
what
to.
the Prime Minister has been doing, and it sounds as though just ploughing on with the same plan is the only strategy that the government seems to be pursuing. Isn't there a danger that in doing that, the government is seen to be simply not listening to what voters have been saying very loudly and clearly in this set of elections?
Well, I think what has caused us damage is the disunity in the party, because that has seeped through locally in my area, and people just say, look, you guys need to get your act together and stop arguing. And that is the actual, to me, that's the absolute crucial point. What they want to see is a united party backing the prime minister. I want to continue with a relentless focus on the cost of living, because people, despite all the measures of the government, people are still struggling. Also on affordable housing and on infrastructure, because that is, people want to see their town centres renewed. We've had close to £100 million, both through levelling up funds and other funds, to rebuild our town centre. People are seeing the fruits of that. That's got to continue. My constituency voted 68% Brexit. So of course, people care about those matters. But the emails that I get are all about housing and the cost of living and infrastructure and the NHS. And it's not about the culture wars, whatever the rights or wrongs of those culture wars issue. We have to focus on what the people's priorities are. And if we do that, and if we're united, I think there still is all to play for, because I do believe that the Labour Party is complacent. In my own area of Harlow, the leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, came twice, even on eve of poll to Harlow. You had shadow cabinet members come up every few days. The Labour Party locally looked like they were measuring the curtains of the town hall. The cat got the cream, and they're looking like that nationally. They look complacent, and the public don't like that. So
But
if we are united and focus on the cost of living and some of the issues I've mentioned, I think, as I say, there is all to play for.
Andy Street, who narrowly lost out as mayor in the West Midlands, has warned against a lurch to the right. Do you think that there is a real danger of that within your party, particularly when you look, for example, at the threat that reform could well pose come the general election?
Well, I think that, first of all, I think Andy Street is a great man. I would love him to stand as MP and have a very senior role in the Conservative Party in the years to come. I think his values are the values of British people. What we've got to remember is that there are millions of floating voters out there, many of them in my own constituency of Harlow, and they are the kind of people who want us to focus on, as I say, cost of living, housing, infrastructure, levelling up. They're not going on about the culture wars at all, and we have to appeal to those kind of people. And if we do that, then we have a chance at the general election. But if we continue to argue, if we continue to publish articles in newspapers or whatever it may be, if we continue to shout, "Oh, this is just a terrible show," like those guys, Stattlers and Wardle from the Muppet Show, then the public will just say, look, you guys can't get your act together. And then the consequences will be enormous.
And do you think there is too much focusing on the culture wars, grabbing headlines in right wing newspapers at the moment over issues like gender rights and so on?
Look, those issues are important, absolutely. But these are not the issues that are going to win us the general election. We have to help people with their cost of living. We have to ensure that when they ring up the GP, that they can get an appointment. We have to do basic things like make sure potholes are fixed across the country. We have to continue with the levelling up program. We have to emphasise apprenticeship and skills as a real offering to young people. We have to have affordable housing, absolutely essential. We need more housing up and down the country. These are the issues that matter. And the evidence is clear. Andy Street, despite the national situation, lost by a whisker. Ben Hoochin focused on those things, whatever other people might say. He didn't focus on the culture wars. He focused on the real things that mattered to his local area and achieved against the odd and has got elected to a third time. We did the same in Harlow. Those are the issues that we focused on, because I know in my constituency and across the country, there are millions of floating voters who want to focus on the issues that make a real difference to them and matter to them in their daily lives.
You are one of the few Conservatives that we've heard from in the last few days who's still talking about the Tories actually winning the election. Do you genuinely think that despite what has happened since the polls closed on Thursday, that under Rishi Sunak, who you said you support, the Conservatives actually could win the general election?
Well, under no illusions, we've got a mountain to climb. There's no doubt about that. But those results that we've seen in Teesside, just missing by a whisker in Birmingham, my own constituency of Harlow, shows that anything is possible. But we have to come together as a party and have a relentless focus on the real things that people discuss over the breakfast table. And that, of course, as I say, must be about helping people with the cost of living, housing. People can't get houses for their kids. Young people find it too expensive even to put down a deposit. So we have to have an offer for our young people. We have to focus on things like vocational education and technical education, which matters to millions of voters, especially those in seats like mine and other red wall seats in the north. And those are the things that if people want to write articles in the newspapers, that's what they should be writing about, but not attacks on the government and the prime minister, because you don't win any votes by that at all. And we've got to stop positioning for the leadership of the Conservative Party after the election and actually do everything we can to try and give the best possible result for Conservatives up and down the country. And we owe it. We owe that to the hundreds of Conservative councillors who sadly lost their seats over the last few days.
Just finally, Robert, you resigned from the government at the end of March. You said that you're going to stand down at the next election. How much of that is to do with the fact that politicians such as yourself now face so much abuse and indeed threats from the electorate?
Well, I'm standing down because I've been a candidate and MP for close to 25 years. I was elected in 2010, but I did 10 years as a candidate in Harlow before that, and it felt in my bones that it's time for me to go and do other things, which I'll miss considerably. But I've always championed what I call blue collar conservatism or white van conservatism, and those are reflect some of the issues that I've talked about in this interview. I found on the whole there have been awful incidences online, and I've had personal threats myself where people have been arrested. But I think most of the people in my constituency of Harlow are wonderful and fair-minded people, but they want to vote for a government that reflects the real cares and worries they have about their day-to-day life. And we've got to do that as a party, as I say, unite and just focus on one thing, which is trying to do best possible at the general election.